Thank you for participating in Well Nourished, Brighter Futures, a Let's Eat Healthy initiative and webinar series. My name is Shannon Young. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist and the Program Director of Food Systems and Access at Dairy Council of California. As a leader in nutrition education for the past 100 years, Dairy Council of California empowers educators, school food service professionals, health professionals, and community leaders to elevate the health of children and families through the pursuit of lifelong healthy eating habits. The purpose of the Well Nourished, Brighter Futures initiative is to invite experts from across disciplines and sectors to come together, like we are doing today, to find opportunities for collaborative action that leads to a future where all children are supported to grow healthfully and reach their full potential. As priorities critical for overall child health continue to grow, their nutritional needs can be easily overlooked, posing risk for inadequate consumption of nutrient-dense foods during childhood and beyond. Working together is essential to help ensure all children and their families have access to nutritious foods and environments that support lifelong healthy eating where they live, learn, work, and play. With your participation in the Well Nourished, Brighter Futures initiative, we hope to establish key principles that can address the unique nutritional needs of children across critical life stages, including the first 1,000 days of life, in early childhood, and during school-age years. We invite the sharing of promising opportunities to support children with proper growth and development while preventing obesity and other chronic diseases to build a strong foundation for lifelong learning and success. Thank you again for your time, expertise, and collaboration to help find solutions to ensure all children, especially those in vulnerable households, are well nourished and supported for a brighter future. I also want to thank Aaron Price and the Glenn Price Group for their support and collaboration in this initiative. I am pleased to introduce Aaron Price, President at Glenn Price Group.
Thanks, Shannon. And Glenn Price Group, or GPG, to briefly introduce ourselves, we're a mission-driven consulting group, and we work primarily with nonprofit organizations and public agencies to maximize impact, and often do that through supporting effective collaboration and partnerships, frequently across sectors and disciplines. And we at GPG are just really thrilled to be partnering with the Dairy Council of California to support this initiative. And again, really bringing that focus on partnership and bringing organizations and agencies together across sectors, across disciplines in support of some shared goals and priorities. And today's presentation is really going to help provide a critical foundation of shared knowledge and shared insight for all of the partners in this initiative to be able to move forward from. So again, at GPG, we're thrilled to be working with Dairy Council of California and all partners in this initiative. And with that, Shannon, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for your partnership. Today, Well Nourished, Brighter Futures topic, Community Collaboration, Improving Access to Healthy Food for All, is going to be presented by Clancy Harrison. Millions of Americans turn to community and government organizations to access food, from soup kitchens set up to feed people during the Great Depression, and today, as we are living through the COVID-19 pandemic, where California food banks are seeing a 73% increase in demand. And while schools are closed and rise to the challenge to provide emergency meals for children. But hunger remains a silent plague on the lives of many individuals in the United States, even in the best of economic times. The right to access healthy food is a human right to live in dignity, free from hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. The right to food is not about charity, but about ensuring that all people have the capacity to feed themselves in dignity. Having not just access to food, but access to healthy foods that support adequate dietary needs is equally important, and why food dignity is a topic that our speaker, Clancy Harrison, is very passionate about. As a registered dietitian, TEDx speaker, and co-author for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal Corporate Guidebook, Food Waste and Zero Hunger, Clancy Harrison challenges the way food insecurity is approached nationally and internationally. Her mission to demolish the stigma surrounding healthy food access places her on the cutting edge of advocacy. Clancy is the founder of the Food Dignity Project, a strategic program for organizations who want to shift how they approach nutrition by making food security a priority. She transforms the lives of thousands of people through her work with healthcare professionals, nonprofit organizations, employers, and universities. Currently, Clancy is the president of the Owl Beach West Side Food Pantry and serves as an ambassador for the National Dairy Council. She is also the founder of multiple grassroots anti-hunger projects in her community. Clancy, welcome to the Well-Nourished Brighter Futures Initiative.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here and to talk about community collaboration with the base of how we improve access to healthy food for everyone at all times. You can see here on the slide my Twitter and my Facebook. Please take this conversation outside of the webinar. Let's touch base. Shoot me some messages if you have questions. But more importantly, let's help educate other people as we go through this process together. And you can find my hashtag Food Dignity. Please share it. Please tag me in it. And we're going to talk a little bit more what food dignity means throughout this presentation. My disclosures are, apparently I really love my dairy. So I'm a National Dairy Ambassador. I'm also a spokesperson for the American Dairy Association Northeast. I'm from Northeastern Pennsylvania, so I'm in this part of the country. And I sit on a couple of boards and advisory panels, and I am an author. When I step on stage, I call myself a recovering food elitist, and you're probably wondering what that is, or maybe it rings a bell and you have some hint, but I call myself a recovering food snob because that's what I was. I wrote a book in 2014, and I wrote it with the mindset that anyone can do whatever I wrote in that book. And I wrote it from a place of my own practices and my own lifestyle and my own privilege, basically. And I put certain foods on a pedestal, and I created fear and shame around other foods. So, for example, if something had red dye, I went so far to call it toxic or poisonous. And one of the biggest issues I had as a dietitian in private practice as I was counseling people is I made a lot of assumptions too. I assumed that anyone can get into a car, first assumption, then that they can drive to any grocery store, particularly grocery stores that I recommend, assumption number two. And when they got to that grocery store, there would be a lot of produce, beautiful fresh produce and wholesome dairy and lean meats and whole grains. And then when they got to the register, they were able to open up their wallet and take out money and pay for the food. So right there, I made very strong assumptions when I was counseling people because I never asked them if they could afford the food that I wanted them to eat for diet, for prevention of disease, or even management of their disease. This is a picture of me in the COVID era now as the president of a food pantry, and we're accepting food. It looks like I'm praying there, just excited that we're getting food because so many people need it. But I am the president of a food pantry, and I also coordinate students to come and help us. But before I became the president, I remember sitting in my husband's church, and the minister said we needed a food pantry president. And I thought to myself, this is perfect because both of my kids are now in school full time. I needed something to do. I was a food service director for 7 years with Aramark in the school system. So I knew how to obtain food, distribute food, serve food. And I thought it was going to be a great opportunity. And it was a volunteer job. So when I got home, I just started thinking, wow, you're a rule follower. You're going to get upset. You're going to get mad because you're going to show up and people aren't following the rules. They're going to be there when they don't need the food, when they should be out working. And I know these are really harsh things that I'm saying, but these were the thoughts that I was having that I would never dare speak about at that time. It was just an internal conversation that I was having. But when I went to the food pantry, my eyes opened up and I realized I made a ton of assumptions. When I started looking around, I saw people coming into the food pantry that were working. They were patching 2 jobs to make ends meet. I had people looking, we still have people looking for work, especially now. One day, a gentleman walked in and he was wearing a crisp suit, clean shaven, and he said, "Is this the food pantry?" And I thought, yes, this is awesome. I'm going to get a check, right? So here I am making more assumptions based off of what someone's wearing. And when I said that I was in charge, he put his head down really low and he said, I have been looking for a job for months. I have 3 kids. I cannot go home empty-handed. Can you help me? And in that moment, my heart sank and I realized here I am judging again based off of my own perceptions. And we pulled his car around. We packed up his car with a lot of food. He left. 6 months later, I did get the check. He got a job. He had to move out of town, but I got a check from him. And it was full circle for me. But we also see a lot of people who are disabled. Maybe they have a medical diagnosis where they can't work. I have a gentleman coming in with Parkinson's. We have cancer patients. I have single mothers, women running from domestic violence, elderly, slipping through the cracks of food assistance. We have college students, veterans. Every week I shake a veteran's hand. Now, for some reason through COVID, I'm seeing a ton of veterans coming through our line. And then obviously something like a natural disaster or a major pandemic can set people over the edge and into a temporary hardship and send someone to knocking on the door of a local food pantry. So right around the same time, I became a leader in the Community Voice Project through the National Academy of Dietetics. And what that was I just had to sit and listen to stories. I did not have to worry about national school lunch programs. I didn't have to do a diet recall or help someone with their diet and disease management. Instead, I just listened, and I had to listen to stories so I can share the stories of how why they would come to a food pantry, what got them into the situation that they were in, what was that hardship, and then more importantly, what was the success story behind it? And we never really talk about those success stories. And when I started listening, my professional mission, it turned right side up. And I'm going to take it a step further. It's become my personal mission, and that's what brought me here to you today. So let's talk about definitions. There's 4 definitions of food security. On this page, we have high food security and we have marginal food security. The government lumps these together in food secure, meaning the people in this category don't really have to worry about their food access, especially high food security. Those people go about their day and not worry about where their next meal is coming from. Marginal food security, it's a little different. We're starting to see some anxiety around where their next meal is coming from. Maybe towards the end of the month, someone might say, you know what, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I know I have $30, so I'm going to really focus on the 10 for 10 sales. So I'm going to buy 10 boxes of pasta for $10 because I know I could feed my kids and we're going to be fine. On this slide, we're going to talk about the food insecurity definitions. We have 2. We have a low food security and a very low food security. So in the low food security category, we start to see a reduced quality of variety and desirability in the diet. So we might have people consuming the 10 for 10 sales, definitely. That's what they're shopping for. But we will also see a lot of prepared pancake mix. A parent might dilute milk so their children can eat. We might see the dilution of formula. And a mom might also skip her meal so her children can eat. In the very low food security, we see reports of multiple indications of disrupted eating. So what does that mean? That means someone might miss a meal one day. They could go 3 days without a meal. So it just really depends on where they are in the process of also if they have food assistance programs such as SNAP or WIC and where they are in the access to that. So pre-COVID data of food insecurity rates, 40 million people were food insecure and 12.5 million children. But there's a number I want to really talk to you about, and that is that during that time, 29% of people who are food insecure in the United States did not qualify for any food assistance programs because they made too much money. And this is a number that we don't really talk about in the United States, and you can find that on the Feeding America Network, and I'm going to show you that right now for the state of California. So if you pull up your state, you will see that in that square box, the 25%, that's where you're going to look at when you click on your state. And you can also do this down to the county level. And I'm going to challenge you to do that. I'm going to challenge you to know these numbers, even if they're past numbers. And this is certainly going to change. But in California, as a whole state, 25% of people who are food insecure live above the threshold, don't even qualify for food assistance programs. In my state of Pennsylvania, it's 40%. So these are really shocking numbers that we should have been talking about. And again, keep in mind, this is going to change. So projections. Right now, we cannot really tell you what the food insecurity rate is going to be, but Feeding America does have projections. And if you don't know Feeding America is the Feeding America network of food banks. So they are really my go-to place to get statistics and follow along for food insecurity, but also they have a lot of information, educational stuff that they put out for healthcare professionals. So on this slide, I want to show you the projection of food insecurity through the Feeding America network. All we can do is project right now, and Feeding America is projecting that based off of the unemployment rate and the increase in points. So you can see three scenarios. There's A, B, and C. And depending on the increase in percentage point, you're going to add an additional million. So scenario A, we will have 3.3 additional million people food insecure. In scenario C, we're going to see 17.1 million additional people who are food insecure. So again, this is just projections, but it's something to keep an eye out for through the Feeding America Network because they provide all the research and the data on food insecurity in the United States. On this slide, we're looking at the occupational categories by food insecurity rate and proportion of workforce. So you can see the orange dot, that food service, retail service, all of the service workers in the hotels, they are at a very high risk of proportion and food insecurity together. And what's interesting about this is that was already a population that was already at a high risk for food insecurity. So this is really compounding this sector of our workforce. So I wanted to show you a picture of our food pantry pre-COVID. So this is Kim, our director, sitting down. We're going to host about 35 families. They come in, they pick up their bags of canned food, bread, and milk, and pasta, and sauce, all kinds of great things in there. And then they get to take whatever produce they want. So that's 35 people, nice and calm, right? This is a picture of us now. And this is actually the back behind Kim that you did not see in the other picture. We never were allowed to use the fellowship hall. Now we fill it up with food. And what you're seeing is a little less than 30,000 pounds of food because we will also have milk delivered, bread delivered, and other produce the day of service. So all this will be gone in less than 3 hours. This was the amount of food that we would go through an entire month. We increased distribution by 1,700%, and that's partly because we would pre-register and we would cap out at 35 families. Now that we're a drive-through option, we don't turn anyone away, and our car line is over 2 miles long, according to our fire department. So it's pretty overwhelming. So situational food insecurity, what would cause a temporary hardship? That could be a loss of a job. We're seeing that all over. Hours getting cut back, medical expenses, affordable childcare, housing, again, those natural disasters, a death of a family member, and a college student. So all of these are examples of what could put someone into a situation where they would have to seek out additional help. So the face of hunger in the United States is constantly on the change. And back in October of 2019, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics dedicated their entire journal to food insecurity. And there was an article interviewing college students and how they felt about being food insecure. And these are some of the things that they talked about. They were embarrassed. There was guilt, shame, anger, blame, worry, fear. This is what they're thinking about. Could you imagine being food insecure, not knowing where your next meal is coming from, seeing your friends going out to eat, but you can't afford it, sitting in the school cafeteria while your friends are eating lunch around you and you don't have anything to eat yourself? So these are just the emotions. And can you imagine if these are your emotions, what's going on internally? And there's a lot of stress. And again, if you went back to that marginal food insecurity, remember, we associated that with anxiety and stress. So when we don't have food insecure. When we are food insecure, we have poor nutritional intake, which leads to poor eating behaviors. We have decreased opportunity in physical activity, poor sleep cycles. All of this increases the risk of obesity and chronic disease. And then we have spending trade-offs. So you have a situation where someone's deciding, do I buy food for my child or do I get gas to go to work? Because if I don't go to work, I can't pay my bills. And if I can't pay my bills, we might not have heat in the winter. And up here in Pennsylvania, it gets cold. Just 2 weeks ago, we always have people in our lines at the food pantry, and people will give us $1, $5, $10, $20 as they come through and pick up food. And part of this process is they want to feel like they're contributing, that they're not a problem, but they're also a solution. And I knew we were getting low on food. So what I do with the cash is I give it out to people at the end. And that the last car was coming through and I just had a $5 and $3 bills. So I had $8. And I thought to myself, oh, do I give this to the person? Like, how, this is so insignificant and it's so, it could be insulting, right? So, and it wasn't crisp, it was crinkled up. And again, I'm making these assumptions, but something inside of me gave it to the lady. And I just walked away. I just kind of give money and I walk away. And I hear her start crying and screaming, thank you. And I turned around and she wanted to hug me, but of course we're not hugging because it's COVID season. And she said, I did not know how my son was going to get to work tomorrow because we don't have gas. I did not know what we were going to do. And so now my son can go to work. That $8 helped them get to work. So again, there's all these spending trade-offs and there's all this stress around food access and what decisions are you going to make and what are you going to prioritize? And when we have this stress and we have poor nutritional intake, it increases our risk of chronic disease. So you can see under the blocks, you can see 10 chronic diseases that people have an increase. And I wanted to really take some time and just target diabetes because, and this comes from the same study before, and what this is showing you is predicted increased risk for diabetes specifically related to food secure households. So if someone's marginal food secure, they have a 61% increase in becoming a diabetic. But yet we still put them in a category that they are food secure, but there's still stress and they still are at risk of chronic disease. And you can see as the severity of food insecurity increases, so does the risk for diabetes in this case, but it's the same trend in the other 9 chronic diseases. When we look at children, they also have health risks. So anxiety and behavior disorders, depression. I speak to school nurses all around the country, and the first question I ask school nurses is, how many of you bring in your own food? 99% of them raise their hand loud and proud because they know Monday morning they're going to have kids sick because they have not eaten all weekend and they just had school breakfast, so their stomach is upset. They also know that they have kids going to the principal's office with behavior disorders who just need a granola bar. We see low bone density in children. They need their calcium. ADHD, iron deficiency, low nutrient intake, low cognitive development, overweight, obesity, and we even see suicide in the older children. So clearly, we need to make sure our children are having access to a steady supply of nourishing food that has a great variety in it. So let's just talk a little bit about the food insecurity and overweight connection because intuitively it doesn't seem like it would go, but it does. Research shows that food insecurity and overweight diagnosis can occur within the same population and even the same families. And so both of these diagnoses can be a consequence of low income, but also the lack of access to food. But what's really good to know is that studies show that participation in federal nutrition programs fight both food insecurity and overweight at the same time because they offer their standards and they also offer there's nutritional standards and they also offer a well-balanced food. So we have SNAP, that is the Supplement Nutrition Assistance Program. So you might think of food stamps, that that's the new, that's what SNAP is. We have WIC, Women, Infant, and Children, and our school meal programs. So why does this happen? Well, we all experience media and marketing of unhealthy foods. We're all a victim of that. But again, it goes back to that stretching the food dollar, the 10 for 10 sales. So we might buy high calorie, low nutrient dense foods, the types of grocery stores. Are people shopping at a Dollar General or a dollar store? Are they going to a convenience store? Or are they going to a fancier high-end grocery store? Also, the location of a grocery store. Someone might be 5 miles from a fancy grocery store, but if they don't have the transportation, they're not going to be able to go back and forth. And so maybe shopping at the local dollar store or the local gas station might be the option. And one time I had a client, actually it wasn't my client, I was speaking and someone came up to me and they said, I had a patient and I never understood why she wouldn't buy healthy foods. And I was about to give up on her. I want to give up on her. And then I heard you speak, and this was after I was speaking, and she emailed me back. And so she said, I talked to the patient and she told me that when she goes to the grocery store, she walks and she has to bring her child with her. And so carrying groceries and trying to make sure that her child doesn't get hit by a car is a major challenge. So she buys very light foods. What are light foods? Ramen noodles. And this was someone who had diabetes, and it was a diabetes educator, and she was trying to understand why ramen noodles. But when we can start asking the right questions and really get to know these barriers and understand these barriers, we could be better healthcare professionals, nonprofit leaders, educators. So again, the transportation, location of the grocery store, quantity and quality of available food. So what is available? I know in a rural grocery store about 10 miles away, if I wanted to walk in and buy produce, I'm probably not going to be that lucky. It's usually very old, very few options, and rotting. We also have a hormonal stress response. We know when we get stressed, we tend to overeat. We might not sleep well, which is going to, I don't know about you, but I've been starving and tired, and I don't make the best decisions. And the next thing you know, I'm going through fast food and I'm eating something that probably I could have had a better option. Then there's lack of access to basic health care. So people might not be going to preventative cares. And then there is fewer opportunities for exercise. So parks could be unsafe. There could be high rates of crime. And maybe a parent cannot afford those extracurricular activities. When I started looking at all of this and I was starting to have all my revelations, I was really interested in the stigma and why people would or would not participate. And what I found was that 59% of households with food insecurity participate in at least one of 3 major federal assistance programs. For me, this number is way too low and we need to do better. And those 3 programs are SNAP, school meal programs, and WIC. Here's our car line. When I started looking at why people would not participate, and this is going to probably be the most important slide that you can take in. So I suggest you screenshot it, because this is, when you know this, you can have solutions. So why aren't people participating? Maybe they don't qualify. Remember, we talked about people make too much money that they don't qualify. There could be a stigma. How are they being treated by the volunteers or even the people who work at SNAP or WIC or just the grocery store when they're checking out their food? The office hours, what's happening there? Does the person have to go to their face-to-face interview for SNAP during the time that they should be working? And now we're back to, well, do I miss 2 hours and not get paid to go and get this? So sometimes when we're living in a situation where all we can think about food and feeding our families, we don't really think of long-term. We're more in survival mode. So it makes sense to make sure I go to work versus looking at the long-term impact of having access to SNAP. Maybe they don't know about the program. Maybe they don't know how to apply. And even if they know how to apply, what about the technical difficulties? I can tell you in Pennsylvania now with COVID, our schools were about 2-3 3 weeks behind because kids did not have internet. They did not have computers. So if a child at home doesn't have a computer or internet, that tells me that the parent cannot get online to sign up for vital programs that they need. And then again, it goes back to transportation. Transportation is a major barrier. So again, when we know these barriers and we can really look at them from a place of where we are and the scope of our practice in whatever field that you're working in, you can start to tackle these. So my job right now is I'm tackling the stigma, and I'm sticking to one. Through our food pantry, we obviously address all of these, but from a speaking standpoint, I feel stigma is really important to me. So what's important to you? So what we should really walk away is that hunger is an ethical issue. Too many times we think that it's a charity or a moral issue, and it's not. It's an ethical. It goes back to me making assumptions that people could buy what I wanted them to eat. I never even asked about food access. So we've been skipping, at least I have. I've been skipping a step. And from my speaking, I've met a lot of people who have also been skipping that step. So we need to go back to basics and really start talking about food access and normalizing food access. So according to the United Nations, organizations need to come up with creative ways to combat complex nutritional issues. So what does that mean? That means we need to collaborate. We need to focus on what we are good at. And this is just a simple example. It doesn't have to be anything outrageous, but this is a local restaurant. They have a fence, and they're down the street from me, but they're across the street from them is a park, Kirby Park, and that's where a bunch of homeless people sleep and live. And we don't have access to them. It's very hard to go down to the tents. They really like to keep outsiders away. So what we decided to do is hang food. And in the winter, we hang hats and gloves and coats and socks. So what you do matters. First, you need to recognize, and that's what we're doing now. And we need to educate. And when I say educate your spouse, educate your child, educate your students, educate your coworkers, your friends, your parents. Just start talking. I can't tell you how many times after I do a presentation, I get that email and it is, you know what, Clancy, I went home, I had a conversation like you told me to with my husband, and for the first time, I learned why he ate saltine crackers and milk. And that's because his parents couldn't afford the cereal and he grew up on food stamps. And she was married to him, didn't even know that. My own stepfather had food stamps. He finally told me, he's my stepfather for 35 years, and he just told me that like 2 years ago. And he knows I've been doing this work. So if we can't have these conversations in our own homes, how are we having the conversations out in the real world? And then we can collaborate. And when we talk about collaboration, there's 3 levels. We have the individual, and that could be you and your student, your patient, your client, your employee. You're institutional, so that means if you're in a school system, are you collaborating? If you're a school nurse, are you talking to the guidance counselor? Are you joining forces? Are you working with a school nutrition professional? So it's really, does the right hand know what the left hand's doing? And are we joining forces to improve food access? And then community is really where we reach out and partner with other people. So let's just do the individual. Individual, you can screen for food insecurity with sensitivity. So screening, you don't have to be a doctor to screen. You could be a guidance counselor. You can be an employer. I screen from the stage. I've screened many times from the stage. And I'll tell you how to screen in a minute. But anyone can screen. It's 2 simple questions. And if you are a physician, you can code. But we certainly, after we screen, we want to refer. We want to code. We want to follow up. If you have any questions or you want resources, you can certainly reach out to me. You can text Dignity and to 44222, and I have some stuff I can share with you on this, especially screening with sensitivity. So when we're going to screen for sensitivity, and we really want to start normalizing food assistance and just the conversation, I think we need to start with a common denominator. And right now, this is what some grocery stores look like. Right? Sometimes we go, I have not been able to buy dry beans here in Pennsylvania, in my town. I've seen limits on peanut butter, chicken, limits on sauce and spaghetti. So at some level, every one of us has experienced food insecurity. So here's the vital sign for screening. You can read those two questions. I'm not going to read them to you. In fact, the next slide, there's going to be a handout that has the questions. So you can see them under the first statement. Within the past 12 months, we worried whether our food would run out before we got money to buy more. So it's a pretty soft question. If they answer yes to any of them except never true, they screen positive for food insecurity. And then what I really love about this resource is you have on the back of it, you can write in your local programs to be able to refer for food assistance programming. So if we're going to do it in a sensitive manner, we want to screen everyone for food insecurity. So if you're in HR, maybe that's when you hire people. Maybe you do a survey every year and you ask those questions. If you're in a guidance counselor, you could do it at the beginning of the year when parents are filling out paperwork. Decide how to screen, verbally or written. According to science and research, people prefer the written form. And you certainly don't want to screen when other people, such as the child or other employees or volunteers, are in the room. And you want to do it, again, in private. You want to normalize. Normalizing could be, you know what, we're doing this, we're asking this with everyone, especially with COVID. We just want to make sure that you have access to healthy, fresh foods. So we're here to help you. And obviously, you want to use the preferred language of the family. Resources for immediate help. In California, I love that there's this app. You can find sites by physical location, a custom map county, all of that information's there. You can filter the searches, so that will help you find meals for kids. And then also the Dairy Council of California has information on what's going on in the schools, especially with the closures. So make sure you check out the healthyeating.org website listed here. Another great resource is a Feeding America, Find Your Local Food Bank. That food bank is pretty much all over the United States. We have food banks, but what's interesting is once you get there, they'll tell you where your food pantries are and other member agencies. So member agencies could be other grassroots programs going on. So you could have like a fresh food pharmacy that is right down the street from you. You don't even know about it. So I suggest you get very familiar with who your food bank is, and I would take it a step further and get to know who that dietitian is or whoever sets up the member agencies, because they're going to have a list of who they provide food for. And what does that tell you? It tells you who you can refer to people who need food. Long-term solutions on top of the previous three are, of course, our programs, because we want our students and children to consume more milk, vegetable, whole grains, and other proteins. So National School Lunch Program, the breakfast program, after school snacks and meals, summer meal service, WIC, and we should have SNAP on here as well. So 3 categories missing from the diet. The American diet, we are missing veggies, dairy, and fruit. So knowing that is probably a good start in trying to work to help people get their fruits and vegetables and dairy, because we know that they're missing. They're the top 3. So one of the things that I love to talk about is how plant and dairy equals a win-win, because it's affordable option, it's tasty, nutrient dense. When you start putting your calcium, vitamin D with your vitamin C, vitamin A, your B vitamins, you're really creating a nutrient dense meal. Easy to low skill level cooking, convenient, accessible. And dry milk powder is free across the Feeding America network. Now we are starting to see more milk available through the Feeding America network through wonderful partnerships. And I really want to touch on canned food. We need to end the canned food fear, because we can get canned food that pretty much has no sodium at all and low sugar or no sugar. So let's look at this. Like, if we know that Americans are not getting enough vegetables, not getting enough fruit, we are seeing an increase in canned food sales now because of COVID. But what happens is that when we add canned produce to our meal, it increases the opportunity to eat more produce, because that food is going to last longer. it can stay on the kitchen cabinet. We're not going to toss it out. So it's very affordable. It's very accessible, but even more, it's convenient. You don't really have a lot of chopping and dicing and food prep with cans and frozen. Dairy is extremely affordable. I costed out using Walmart pricing online. Now, this was about 6 months ago. 3 servings of dairy can cost as little as $1. Look at for a quarter, a half cup of cottage cheese, 12 grams of protein, calcium, selenium, and more. So this would be great for some type of canned pineapple, canned peaches. I know my daughter loves that, and I know she's getting that vitamin C to help her absorb the calcium. And if we look at milk, the profile is very tough to match because it has 9 essential nutrients, 8 grams of high quality protein. It's the leading food source for 3 out of 4 nutrients. That is a public health concern, such as calcium, potassium, and vitamin D. So benefits of food assistance programs. Really, it's going to improve access to healthy food. There's going to be confidence in feeding the family, less stress, peace of mind. For every dollar spent on SNAP, there's $1.80 put back into the economy. And we're going to see behavior of kids, the academic, there's going to be better outcomes, job placement, higher degree when they leave high school. There's going to be more sleep and energy and better health overall. So what is institutional and community collaboration? We're just going to do these two together. So to be an effective collaborator, you want to be a connector of resources. I tell people all the time when they come to work with us at the food pantry, I ask them, what are they good at? Where are their resources? What is their network? What can they bring that we don't have? We don't need someone doing another food drive. So when we approach volunteers that way, we have an extremely great success story. We have people from all over helping us. So you want to support an existing program. You don't want to start something new. And real quick, as COVID came out, we had a dealership, a car dealership decided they were going to do a makeshift shopping in the place where they changed the oil of their car. And I almost had, I was hyperventilating a little bit at the food service person in me. And when I saw the pictures on the internet, now this was down the street from us, of our food pantry. When I saw the pictures on the internet, the food's on the floor, the oily floor, right? And they really did not know what they were doing. And when this was happening, they were pulling resources from us because I had to start competing with getting donations. I had to start competing with media. I had to compete with even our food bank and delivery trucks. So it became very stressful. But if they really focused on what they did best, which is trucks, we could have partnered and they could have been helping me, our food pantry, pick up food with their trucks. And it would have been a lot more effective and we would have been able to serve a lot more people. So we want to strengthen other programs with what we are good at. So consider new partnerships. Here's a list. I have this later on, but what could you do in your community based off of where you work? One hint on this, I'm going to tell you the WIC RD. We think of WIC as more of a nutrition outreach, breastfeeding, but they have a robust referral system. So that referral system is something that you could get, if you can get your hands on. You're given a list of all the local partnerships, all of the local food resources in your area, and even more than just food. It could be clothing, free medical care, insurance, all kinds of great things. So you can look at this. I'm not going to go through each one. My biggest thing has been partnerships with universities, and I take a lot of students, whether it's service learning or interns. I would not be able to do what I do at the community level because it's volunteer. We just wouldn't be able to do it without the students. So you also want to know what your potential collaborator's mission is, because if you can pair their mission with your outcomes, you're going to be set up for success with that partnership. You're going to have great outcomes and a great partnership. You also want to know what keeps them up at night. What is their big pain points? What frustrates them? And then how could you alleviate that with your outcomes? And this is a dumpster. It was 2,000 pounds of food we had to toss out of right after the Stamp Out Hunger. It's the biggest food drive in the nation. And after that, I vowed we are never going to do food drives again. So now when people come, they're using their expertise and pairing us up with food vendors who are willing to donate. So we don't have to deal with this anymore. So it's really great. So knowing what frustrates someone and their pain points is very beneficial. So this is just something for you to reflect on. How can you strengthen an existing partnership within your network and your community? And really that's an internal reflection. It goes back to what are you good at? And it doesn't have to even be what your job is. That's what's so exciting about this. I had a student who, she came to me, I said, what are you good at? What's the best thing that you can do? And she said, I play the piano. I said, well, this is great. Now she's a master's level dietetic intern. And I said, you're gonna play the piano because we have one, we're in a fellowship hall. And she looked at me, she's like, well, I came here to learn about nutrition. And I said, good, pay attention to the mood before today. Let's not play the piano today, watch the mood, and then tomorrow play the piano and see what happens. And what happened was we had an uplift of camaraderie and community, and people walked with their head high because they heard this great music, and she was absolutely fabulous. So reconsider, again, let's revisit, look at these partnerships. If anyone does have other ideas, please send me a message, because just as I'm here to talk and teach, I'm also here to learn. So I love getting feedback and learning what your ideas are, because I think when we can share ideas for the greater good, we all benefit. Here's just an example of a principal. This is again at our food pantry. You're seeing the stage now, which is the only place we would house our food. But this principal, not only did he set up mobile food pantries with COVID when the kids were getting their free meals, but he went out and he delivered food to his top 30 families who were in need. How wonderful is that? And this one is a really great example. It's the Pennsylvania American Academy of Pediatrics. We're creating these dyads between pediatricians and food pantries. They're partnerships where they screen and then they refer. We're doing 20 across the state. So it's pretty exciting. This is a picture of me. I look exhausted. I think we're all exhausted, but I get really excited when I get to hand out my milk. You can see some cauliflower down there, but behind me we also have oranges and apples, and we had sliced ham that day too, and eggs, so it's pretty exciting. So your next steps, what does that look like? I challenge you to make a list of 3 or more local food relief organizations in your area. And again, you can go back to that local RD or even your food pantry dietitian. And I'm gonna tell you, focus on the local, not the state or national. We have a grassroots efforts, it's called Dinner for Kids, right down the street from our food pantry, where they deliver hot meals 5 days a week to kids in need in our area. Set up one meeting with one of the organizations on your list to consider for a new partnership. But remember, you're gonna wanna find out what their pain points are, what their missions, and what you're good at, and call them up. And this could be within your own organization. It does not have to be someone else in the community. It could be, like I said, if you're a school nurse, just setting up that collaboration with a guidance counselor or even the local pediatrician could have huge benefits. And participate in the Well-Nourished Brighter Futures initiative. We also would love for you to promote food and nutrition programs and encourage participation. You can use your new list, right? But when I say promote food and nutrition programs, if you have a story, share it if you feel comfortable. I've noticed that when people feel comfortable enough to share their story, that normalizes food assistance programs. It normalizes access to healthy food for everyone. It gives people permission to say, you know what, that was me too. Because chances are almost everyone has experienced one bout of food insecurity at some point in their lifetime. I can tell you when I was in college, I did eat ramen noodles all the time, and I did count my pennies and my quarters. So what can we talk about that could put us all in a common playing field and connect each other and build up trust and empathy? So I would love to have you join the Food Dignity Project. For ongoing tools and resources, you can text Dignity to 44222. I have a ton of resources. I keep an update of all of the resources that you can download, and they're clickable. And you can even get all of the research in APA format that could have potentially come out of my mouth or that was on the screen. And it's about, I think, 12 pages PDF of the research. So lots of great stuff. And I just want to thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be able to speak to you today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Clancy. The information that you shared is very interesting and one for all of us to really think about and consider a lot of the action steps that you shared. I do have a few questions for you. And the first is, what are one or two important successes or achievements you have seen in the area of food insecurity or food dignity?
Yeah, this is kind of a really, I'm just going to speak my truth. I think it's COVID. For years, I had to fight to even speak on a stage about hunger and food insecurity. People really didn't understand how the two connected. I was always defending. I had even dietitians say, you know what, if you talk about food insecurity, they're going to close your ears. Just talk about collaboration. And they said, you know, we don't work with people who are food insecure because we don't work with SNAP, WIC. We're not school lunch program providers. And the other thing about this too that's a success is we are getting a lot of media attention. No one really talked about food insecurity. People know of our food pantry now. That's why another reason why we have such a high increase. The media, I would always do nutrition segments for our local media, and I would always say, come on, I keep doing this for you. Why don't you do something on food insecurity? And they would always deny. And now if I turn on my local news, guess what? There's a story on a food pantry or a food bank or a restaurant doing great things. So it's in the media. And because it's in the media, one day ABC National dedicated every single show to raising money for Feeding America, right? So we have the awareness now. And I think because we have the awareness, maybe when we turn back to normal, whatever that is, we will always know that food insecurity is a major crisis. I used to say it was a hidden crisis. It's not hidden anymore. It's in all of our faces. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And so now we know that it's a crisis, and it's not just a hunger crisis. It's a health care issue. It's a health crisis, because if we have these increase in comorbidities and these diseases, what is that going to do in the future? So we need to, I think this is going to bring a lot of people together.
I would completely agree. And that leads me into my next question, because as I've shared with you, the Well-Nourished Brighter's Futures initiative is really to bring together state leaders here in California to address food insecurity, nutrition, and the nutritional needs specific to children so that they can have a brighter future. So with that, what are 1 to 2 key challenges we should all consider for future work in food insecurity for children?
I think no matter what your scope of practice is, whoever you are, if you are in a leadership role, really consider screening for food insecurity and learning more about it. So we need to start collecting this data and getting more information, and we can't help someone unless we know that they need help. And so too many times we think screening is just for a doctor, and I'm going to push that out a lot further and say, no, it's not. Anyone can do it. And it's pretty eye-opening when you do it, especially when I do it from a stage. It's pretty, I've noticed that people don't even self-identify with food insecurity until after my talk, when we do a post, right? We do a post and then a pre-survey, and the numbers go up. And it's probably because when we think of hunger, we might be thinking of starvation. You know, I'm a product of the 80s, so I grew up seeing kids in third world countries with swollen bellies and like bugs flying around their face, and that was hunger to me. But food insecurity is not necessarily starvation, right? So I think when we can start really asking the right questions and getting the right answers, we could be effective leaders. And if you're an employer and think about changing the worksite wellness program. Instead of telling people what to eat and paying for these other people to come in and coach, these wellness coaches, What if you just provided fresh produce, dairy, meat, whole grains in a box once a month, twice a month, and you're giving people healthy foods to eat? You're going to increase morale, you're going to increase productivity, loyalty, and hopefully long-term, your bottom line because of healthcare, decreasing healthcare costs ultimately, and depression. So, sorry.
That's a different take on employee wellness that I have not heard of, but we have seen it in schools with the fresh fruit and vegetable program,
Yep.
where they're putting out fruits and vegetables for the kids throughout the day.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. What do you suggest as 1 to 2 most important priorities for collaborative action to support child nutrition needs for growth, their development, and success?
Yeah. So I think the number one priority is when we're working with kids and say we do screen, right? So let's go back to that, but let's take it a step further and have the application for school lunch on site with the parent, right? So if you're a guidance counselor, if you're a physician, if whoever you are, and you are able to help someone fill out the application and you have it so they can take it to the school, you're going to increases the chance of participation in the school lunch and school breakfast program. So I think that that's just a really good, if we're talking about kids, right? We know that
Right.
the one consistent place where they can get food is at school, breakfast and lunch.
Even right now during COVID.
Yep.
Okay. What are 1 to 2 key recommendations for moving forward for our state leaders to address food insecurity for children and their families? You know, as we're bringing together this group of leaders that could be, you know, the superintendent of public instruction, maybe a legislator, a physician that leads an organization, you know, bringing together these leaders, what can we share and help try to do to address food insecurity for children and their families as a group from multi-disciplines?
Yeah, that's a good question. A very complicated question and
It
complex, right? I think the first thing is getting them all in the same room,
Definitely. Yeah.
right? So like, how do we get them? And I think we also need to leave politics out of it, right? So too many times I see in the media or my conversation, as I was a PAC chair, so political action chair for my state association, dietetic association. And I think we need to understand that the children are our future, and the children we need to make them a priority. So too many times I feel that food nutrition programs such as SNAP or WIC or school meals become more of a political issue. And so we need to remove that, and we need to really focus on that child and get on the same level of talking. And I think the more we share stories, the more we share success stories, what happens there is that it becomes memorable. We humanize food assistance. We humanize food access, and we normalize food access. And we put a face. When we tell a story, we put a face, and people will remember that. And it also inspires them to be the change and be a leader and want to do something pretty extraordinary, especially in this time. That's what we need. So I think sharing something as simple as sharing stories can be a very powerful tool if it's done in the right way. Yeah.
Thank you. That's the political part. That one is a very interesting avenue to take. So thank you for sharing. So today we explored what food insecurity looks like in the US, the negative health impacts, lack of access to nourishing foods have on individuals that lead to lifelong health risks. We also talked about hunger as an ethical issue and the importance of collaboration. Thank you, Clancy, for your participation on the community collaboration, improving access to healthy food for all, and for sharing your passion and cutting-edge advocacy to demolish the stigma surrounding healthy food access. For those of you who are watching today, we look forward to coming together to share promising opportunities to support children with proper growth and development while preventing obesity and other chronic diseases to build a strong foundation for the children's lifelong learning and success. Thank you for participating in Well Nourished Brighter Futures, a Let's Eat Healthy initiative and webinar series. Aaron, can you please join us and share your final thoughts?
Thanks, Shannon. And thanks, Clancy, so much for this great presentation. You've certainly given us a lot to think about. And I think just a few things that really popped up for me in your presentation, starting with those assumptions, I think provides a lot of level setting for partners coming together in this initiative and just helping us all really examine our own assumptions, as well as some policy considerations. I think it was 28% who are food insecure who are not even eligible, let alone the other challenges or speed bumps they may face in getting public food benefits. And then certainly connecting some of these concerns and some of this data around food insecurity to added stress in children and families' lives, to increased risk of poor health outcomes and chronic disease. I think it really resonated with me. And finally, your framing of collaboration, I think, was a great way to be thinking about how we can really leverage our own strengths and each other's strengths towards some shared impact, some shared goals and priorities, without trying to reinvent the wheel, without trying to create something new if we're already pointed in the right direction. So I just want to really thank you again. I'm looking forward to watching this video again once we've got the video up and running. And I want to also thank you, Shannon, and thank the Dairy Council of California for your leadership on this, on the Well Nourished Brighter Futures initiative. And we look forward to continuing to work together to engage partners in this work and strengthen the initiative generally. Thank you.